I swear I didn't do it just for better wheelies.
Hey y'all, Derek here. Today we're talking sprockets. I'm switching to a 13 tooth front, 42 tooth rear sprocket combo on the KLX 300. I'm going to take you through a couple of the different common combinations on this bike. I'll show you how to install the front, I'll show you how to install the rear, and then at the very end we will show you how to get your chain slack set right. I'll put this all in chapters, so if you're only switching out your front sprocket, you don't have to waste your time with the rear. As soon as I put a couple hundred miles on the 1342 setup, I will compare it with the 1340 setup that I've been running for the past 600 miles. If you're interested in this kind of content, please subscribe. So let's jump into it. Let's talk numbers. If you didn't know already, the KLX 300 comes stock with a 14 tooth front and a 40 tooth rear. I think this is a really well-balanced combo. It's great on the streets, it's great on back roads, it's great on dirt roads, but it's not the best on trails. So for that reason, I originally switched to a 13 tooth in the front and kept the 40 in the rear. When you're messing with different size sprockets on your bike, you're gonna affect two things, your torque or your top speed. So I originally switched to the 13 tooth front and kept the 40 on the rear to get more torque out of this bike. I do a lot of off-road riding, and the stock gearing just wasn't getting me up those hills the way I wanted it to. So even simply taking one tooth off your front sprocket, you get 7.1% more torque and 7.1% less top speed. So why am I switching to 1342? Well, the more time I spend with this bike, I realize that I am really not worried at all about top speed. I spend very little time on these big highways. 90% of my time is on back roads, dirt roads, and trails. I want to switch to 1342 to get a more usable third gear while I'm out on those trails. And then every now and then when I'm trying to climb up a hill in second gear on the KLX 300, it'll really bog down on me. So I think even just a little bit more torque is going to go a long way. Sticking with the 13 tooth front sprocket, adding 2 more teeth in the rear gives me 4.5% more torque and 4.5% less top speed. So that's going to help me out even more on the trails. So in total, when compared to stock gearing, I'm going to have 11.6% more torque and 11.6% less top speed. I believe with the stock gearing, you can get about 80 miles an hour on these bikes. So there will be a significant drop in top speed, but it should work well for me. And like I said, once I put a few hundred miles on it, I'll give you a review of it and let you know the top speed I could reach with 1342 and kind of go from there. Another common sprocket combo on these bikes is a 1445 combo. That's almost an identical gear ratio to 1342, but with that combo, you cannot use the stock chain. You'll need to buy a longer chain and install that as well. One of the reasons why people decide to go with the 1445 combo is these chain sliders. When you switch to a 13 tooth front sprocket, your chain will rest on these sliders more than normal, but these little sliders are replaceable and they're gonna wear out over time anyway. All right, so let's start with the front sprocket. So we're just gonna start with 2 8mm bolts here. When you're replacing the front sprocket, keep your bike off the stand. It's gonna help you out later. You get those bolts out in the cover and this bracket come right out. Just set them to the side. And then I'm gonna go ahead and loosen the back tire so that we can create enough slack to get the chain off when we get the front sprocket off. All right, so to get the rear tire off, there's a cotter pin here you need to get out. So basically you just need to squeeze these 2 tabs together to make a straight line and then pull it out. I got a pair of channel locks for that. All right, next we're gonna loosen this axle nut. I have a 27mm socket, and I'm gonna reuse that pair of channel locks to hold onto it on the other side. All right, so it's loosened. I'm gonna leave it like that for now, since we're only working on the front sprocket right now. So these bolts here are what you use to adjust the tension on your chain. We need to loosen these enough so that we can get more slack in the chain to take it off when we get the front sprocket off. So you're going to loosen this locking nut This is on both sides of the bike. With the locking nut loosened, we're going to come over here and create some space for this tension plate to move. I'm going to do this on the other side real quick, and then we'll focus back on the front sprocket. Back here to your front sprocket, that same 27 mil socket you could use to get off the nut here. These are on tight, so I do recommend the impact wrench or a breaker bar at least. They could be kind of stubborn to get off, but I'm gonna go ahead and take mine off. All right, pull this washer off. So I slid my rear tire up to this plate that we loosened, and it doesn't look like I got enough slack to get this sprocket and chain off. So just come back here and create enough slack to get the front sprocket off. I've created enough chain slack where we can wiggle this around and get the front sprocket off. So this is my 13 tooth front sprocket, which I am reusing. In an ideal world, you'll switch out the front, rear, and chain all at the same time. But hey, I'm not too worried about it. I'm gonna reuse this front sprocket and reuse my chain until I replace them all down the road. So if you're putting a fresh front sprocket back on, just reverse the process until you have it installed. And then I will drop a time code for resetting your chain slack. All right, so if you got your front sprocket reinstalled, like I said, I am going to create a chapter for readjusting your chain slack. So if you want, you could skip to that part. If you are replacing your rear sprocket, we're going to go ahead and take the rear tire off. So let's get into it. All right, time to take care of the rear sprocket. Now we do have the motorcycle on a stand, so this rear tire is lifted. And in case you skipped right here and you've never taken your back tire off before, the only thing holding it on is this cotter pin, which you'll need to pry out of there, this 27 millimeter nut, and you'll have to loosen your tension bolts on both sides of the wheel. But I'm going to go ahead and disassemble this and take the tire off. Hang on to this washer. Pick up the rear tire just a little bit, and you can push the axle straight through. I'll show you the other side here. All right, so your axle's through, your rear tire drops down. Your chain should be relatively loose and come right off. Your tire will slide out. All right, so you got 6 bolts holding the rear sprocket on. Here's what they look like disassembled. Just a bolt, a nut, and a washer. These are 8 millimeter, and these nuts are 12 millimeter. So you'll need a 12 millimeter wrench to hang on to the bottom of them, and an 8 millimeter Allen or hex key for the bolt. I left 2 of these on here to kind of talk you through the process. These are held on with blue Locktite, so they are going to be pretty difficult to get off. I used my good old friend PB Blaster, and I just sprayed the nuts down there. Let it sit for about 5 minutes, and then it loosens it up and makes it a little bit easier. So you got 2 options. You can use your hex or Allen key and the 12 millimeter. Put the 12 millimeter underneath to hang on to the nut. And it's going to use some force, but eventually it'll break loose. All right. Or if you get frustrated and you start to hit your knuckles on this rear sprocket, I always recommend an impact wrench. I got an 8 millimeter Allen socket there. So same with this. 12 millimeter goes underneath, and you just use the impact wrench. Boom, comes right out. All right, so all 6 bolts are out, and your sprocket comes right off. Well, this one's still in. Now your sprocket comes right off. Finally, time for the new sprocket here. 42 tooth from Sunstar. It lines up perfectly. So I'm gonna put a tiny bit of blue Loctite back on these bolts. That's enough for me. So I'm just getting all these on here finger tight for now. All right, we got them all finger tight now. I'm just gonna use the impact wrench to tighten them all the way. It definitely speeds it up. If you don't have an impact wrench, I'll link to one. They're not very cheap, but they're great to have around if you want to work on motorcycles and cars and lawnmowers and stuff like that. So it could come in handy. It's up to you. I checked the thermometer in my shed. It's about 90 degrees in here, so you're gonna catch me sweating. Just in case you haphazardly took off your rear tire, this is what the axle assembly looks like from left to right when you're reinstalling it. Might help someone out. Also, do not forget your spacers. There should be one on each side. And last but not least, I like to put a little bit of grease on these axles. Doesn't have to be too much. And again, I'll link to all this stuff in the description. All right, so we got the axle through to the other side. Everything's in place. The rotor's in between the brake pads. Now we're gonna reinstall the rest of this hardware, but we don't want it tight at all. We wanna be able to slide this so we can get the chain back on. It's barely tightened, and you can see now we can move the tire forward and back in order to get the chain on the sprocket. So I like to push the tire as far forward as possible, and now it's as easy as just working your chain on the sprocket. All right, our chain's on. So we're ready to adjust the chain slack. I'm gonna show you what the manual recommends, and then we'll get it done. If you've been watching along, you might notice a new green chain guide here. I needed to replace my original one, so I'm trying out a couple different kinds. So I'll have a video coming out for that shortly. So looking at the manual here, it says to set the motorcycle up on its side stand, and then you're gonna want 30 to 40 millimeters of slack in your chain, measuring from the bottom. So I got my bike on the side stand here, and what you're going to want to do, this is your midway point right at the end of this slider. So you're going to want to push down and push up and measure the distance in between. A little bit really goes a long way on these tension bolts. Watch the chain here. As I tighten the bolt, you should see the chain move. See, so just like a quarter turn of this bolt makes a huge difference in your chain slack. I have a millimeter ruler here that I'll also link to, but what you're trying to do is measure the difference between when you push it down and when you push it up. You want to get between 30 and 40 millimeters. So this notch in the chain here sits at about 45 when you push it down. So you'd want to get it to about 15. So right now my chain's too tight. One more note here, you want both sides of the bike to be equal. So here's an old mark that I had before I changed the sprockets. This is where my tension plates lined up at. You want these on both sides of the bike to be at the same exact point. So I'm gonna loosen the tension on the chain until I get between that 30 and 40 millimeter tension point. At that point, tighten down all your bolts, tighten down your rear axle, and you're ready to ride. So if you like this sort of content, if you're interested in the KLX 300 or moto vlogs, please like, comment, subscribe. Feel free to make fun of me in the comment section. I'll catch you on the next one.